of the forecasting competition. Now, this is the second forecasting competition already. We started the first forecasting competition in 2021 at the beginning of COVID, and we received three international teams to participate, and their papers were also published by Annals of Tourism Research. Then in 2023, when we start to see the recovery of the international tourism market, we organized this second international tourism forecasting competition. And the competition is co-organized by Professor Haiyan Song from the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, who unfortunately cannot be with us. He's attending another conference somewhere else. And also Doris Chingguang Wu from Sun Yat-sen University and myself. Now, we would like to acknowledge Annals of Tourism Research, who especially the two former editors, Scott McCabe and Sarah Donica, who agreed to publish the winning team's papers in Annals. And also, as colleagues may know, Professor Haiyan Song and myself are also the co-curators of a curated collection of tourism demand forecasting within Annals of Tourism Research. So we acknowledge the support by the former editors of the journal. Also, we would like to acknowledge the support from the tourism and hospitality section of the International Institute of Forecasters. And Professor Wu was the former chairperson of this section. So we also received the support from the International Institute of Forecasters. So with all of this background, we successfully finished the second international tourism forecasting competition. I mentioned when we had the first competition, we only had three teams. When we called for the interest for the second competition, we received 40 international teams who registered their interests, and the 24 teams successfully completed the competition. And the 24 teams were from more than 15 countries covering 5 continents. So it was a truly international global competition. I'm very pleased with the engagement of our global community, not only just within the tourism academic community, but beyond. We have colleagues from computing, science, from management, business, a range of disciplines. So really pleased to see this. Now, I will not take too much time because we have 5 speakers, excellent speakers to give insights into their models and methods and the results. We also have Professor Wu, who will be giving us a brief overview. So now let me hand over to Doris, please.
Okay, thank you, Professor Lee. Now I'm sharing my screen. It's the honor to have a very brief review of this second tourism forecasting competition. Here are the primary objectives of our competition. Indeed, our second competition is quite different from the first one from different perspectives. For example, the first competition focuses on the forecasting during the crisis, and our second competition focuses on the post-crisis recovery stage. And also for the second competition, we both have point and interval forecasting, and our data cover tourist arrivals from to 20 destinations. And also, as Professor Lee just mentioned, in this competition at the end, 24 international teams has attended this second competition. And for our set design, we can see the first step. We arrivals from mainland China to 20 destinations up to 2023 February. And for the step 2, forecasting generation, our forecasting period is from August 2023 to July 2024. And we also have 2 tracks. One is a forecasting, a point forecasting track. The other one is interval forecasting. Interval forecasting is optional, but point forecasting is compulsory. And at the end, we use MASE to evaluate the forecasting accuracy for point forecasting track and the Winkler score to measure the forecasting performance for interval forecasting track. At the end, among the 24 teams who attended the point forecasting track, 14 teams also attended the interval forecasting track. Here is a list of the winners for the point forecasting, including 5 teams. Congratulations. And here is a list of the interval forecasting winners for teams. Congratulations again. And also last year, we also hold a special award ceremony for this competition on the International Symposium on Forecasting. Also, based on this competition, we also have 6 articles published on Annals of Tourism Research based on their great performance in this competition. Okay, here is a very brief demonstration about the result. We can see for the point forecasting, left side is the average MACE values. We can see the values for 24 teams. The MACE values vary from 1.12 to 3.81 across all teams. Also, we have also calculated the MACE for the naive model, the benchmark model. We can see indeed the benchmark model's MACE is about 2.5. So among 24 teams, about 16 teams has beat the benchmark model. And on the left, on the right side is about the MACE over different destinations for each team. We can see all the teams, each teams, they for some certain destination, they have very great MACE value. But overall, the winners of the competition have smaller fluctuations across all destinations. Next is about the interval forecasting results. Here are about 14 teams. We can see on the left side and the right side are forecasting width and the coverage rates. Forecasting width indicates the width of the interval. Smaller or more narrow width indicate the interval forecasting is more preferred. And about the coverage rate, this matrix indicates the accuracy. For example, if we produce our forecast interval and we do the forecast 10 times, if for 8 times among these 10 times, 8 times the real demand fall into this interval, then we call the coverage rate is about is 80%. So coverage rate smaller, higher coverage rate means more accurate. And indeed, these 2 metrics are quite have some trade-off effect. Therefore, in this competition, we use Winkler score, which combines both indicators to evaluate the forecast performance for the interval forecasting. This figure indicates the average ranking over 20 destinations of the Winkler scores. Therefore, ideally, the value range should be between 1 to 20. And in this figure, we can see the best team, or the team with the best performance has the slowest ranking, average ranking of about 5. Okay, here is a very quick brief review of this competition. And next time we are going to have our 5 speakers to share um, their team's work. The first one is Zhiqin from King's College London. 知琴 may
Yep.
you start?
Uh, Hi everyone. My name is Zhiqin Tan. I'm a final year PhD student from King's College London. Together with my team, Jiaxi Li and Junpeng we joined this competition when I was in the University of Surrey, and today I'm glad to present our work titled Post-Pandemic Tourism Forecasting with Ensemble RNN. Just a brief introduction to the work. The pandemic has caused abrupt disruption to the tourism industry. Forecasting tourism demand under such special circumstances presents unique challenges. As a result, time series data for tourist arrival often exhibits patterns that are non-stationary, non-linear, and complex. Furthermore, the seasonality in tourism further increase the complexity of forecasting tourism demand. Despite these challenges, accurate tourism forecasting remains important to various stakeholders, such as government and also private firms, in adjusting and planning strategically for the future. So in this competition, as Doris has briefly explained, we are given the historical monthly Chinese outbound tourist arrival for 20 destinations from January 1989 to January 2023. And we are asked to predict the tourist arrival for all 20 destinations, both the point forecast and optionally the 80% confidence interval forecast from, from August 2023 to July 2024. Our forecasting methodology is illustrated in this overall diagram. It's subdivided into 4 steps. First is we acquire explanatory and our target variable. This includes economic data, climate data, and COVID-19 related data. Next, we perform data processing, including standardization of all the features as well as feature engineering. Then we perform a 5-fold cross-validation on on 4 different models. So first is the Sarima model, decision tree, temporal fusion transformer, and a few types of recurrent neural network model. This cross-validation is used to perform hyperparameter tuning with grid search. And once we have the optimal hyperparameter, we run the model training and evaluate it using several evaluation metrics. So first is the explanatory variables. We collected quite a few numbers of variables that we think is useful in forecasting tourism demand. These include socio-economic variables, which includes the currency exchange rate between China and the 20 destination country, the GDP of China and the destination, as well as the fragile state index of the 20 destination as a proxy to how stable or how peaceful this destination is. Secondly is the climate data, which is the monthly temperature and monthly precipitation data. And finally is the COVID-19 related variables. This includes the number of cases each month, number of deaths caused by COVID-19 each month, the travel policy implemented in the destination country and China as well. And finally, the global Google search trend of the term COVID as a proxy to the general interest of the world towards the pandemic. Next, we also model shocks and unforeseen events that we have seen in the historical tourism arrival data. These are modeled with two dummy variables called unrest and travel restriction. So for example, we set this unrest to 1. The unrest is these variables are Boolean variables. We set it to 1 during the SARS outbreak. We also set it to 1 for Singapore and Thailand due to the aviation incidents of Malaysian Airlines. For travel restriction, we also set it to 1 as an example for the Republic of Korea between March to November 2017 as China bans travel agency tour to this country. So these are just some of the example for these two dummy variables. Next, in time series forecasting problem, temporal features such as the month and the year are also used in the prediction algorithm. So although these temporal features are highly correlated with the climate features, it is not always true for destination near the equator, such as Singapore. So common way to encode these features are one-hot encoding or ordinal encoding. In our work, we use cyclical features among other alternatives to encode the periodical temporal feature, that is the month number with sine and cosine function, as shown in the two graphs here. Next, we also engineered a feature called travel policy. This feature indicates the border restriction between China and destination. And we obtained this data from the Oxford CGRT dataset, where they record whether the government in each country bans outgoing or incoming tourism. So we use this, we set this feature to 1 as long as either the China or the destination country restrict outgoing or incoming tourism. We also made a few assumptions in our work. First is the pandemic-related variables will become exponentially less important toward the end of the forecast period. Secondly, we assume travel ban or border control will not happen during the forecast period. We also assume that no unforeseen event will occur in the forecast period. Next, as machine learning algorithms typically converge faster when the input features are of similar scales, we perform a log transform and standardize all variables so that they have a mean of 0 and standard deviation of 1. So for example, here is the histogram of the tourism arrival across all destinations, which is highly skewed. After a log transform and standardization, the tourism arrival, the distribution becomes closely resembles a normal distribution. We also remove periodical patterns from our time series data using seasonal trend decomposition based on Lewis. This is because although recurrent neural networks are capable of learning seasonality in theory, it is often better to remove this pattern so that the model can focus on learning the recovery trend without any seasonal influence. So we train our RNN model to predict only the trend and residue. And after the model prediction, we add back the remove seasonal component to reintroduce back the seasonal influence. So as I mentioned, we tried different models, which is Sarima, decision tree, temporal fusion transformer, and a few types of RNN. So first is the RNN1, which generates forecasts autoregressively. The second type is the RNNH, which predicts all 12 months at once. And then we ensemble both of these type of RNN model for our RNNE ensemble model. In our experiment, we separated the experiment into two parts. First is the pre-COVID experiment, where the models are trained on data up to 2019 and tested on 2019 data. This is used for model selection and hyperparameter tuning. The second experiment is the post-COVID experiment, where the models are trained on data up to 2022 and tested on 2022 data. So the results of this experiment is what we use in our final submission to the competition. So just very briefly, the key results we have. So in experiment 1, we observed that traditional model such as Sarima here has the best MAPE and MASE score, which makes sense because typically traditional models are preferred when the time series pattern has a consistent pattern and is easy to predict. However, in experiment 2, our RNN model consistently outperformed the traditional methods such as Sarima and decision tree because this model fails to capture the shock introduced by pandemic and are not suitable for this complex post-pandemic scenario. Our work has a few limitations. Firstly, the use of this global COVID-19 search trend may not accurately reflect regional pandemic impact, as recovery rates would vary significantly across different type of destination. Secondly, without any explanatory variables to model the effect of the pandemic on the citizens' life, the model would assume this pandemic as a one-off event without accounting for its lasting impact on a normal human's life. And finally, China's government policy on travel agency, which is the main contributor of outbound tourism in China, was also not included in the model feature due to time constraint. So to conclude, we explored a range of different methods to forecast tourism arrival from China in the post-pandemic recovery phase. Our ensemble RNN model outperformed conventional forecasting models, specifically in the turbulent post-pandemic context. Our team achieved the third runner-up in the point forecasting track in the competition. So thank you for your attention. If you're interested, our source code is available for future work in the GitHub. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Zhiqin, for your detailed sharing on the ensemble deep learning method. Okay, because at the end we have a special Q&A session. Now let's move to our second presentation. Now let's welcome Dr. Chris Zhang from Deakin University. Oh, Chris, I think you are muted. We cannot hear you.
Sorry. Thanks, Professor Doris Wu. It's my great pleasure to introduce our paper, Imputation Recovery Tourism Demand Forecasting. And we collaborate with Bobo Song, Professor Xin Li, Professor Rob Law, and Professor Gang Li in Deakin. And today I'm going to present our work. So our work is accepted in ATR, Announced Tourism Research in June of 2026. And we actually won the third runner-up prize in the point forecasting track as well. So I will start to introduce our paper and methodology in the three subsets. The first one is a little bit background of our tourism demand forecasting and existing literature and some of the challenges. And that's actually bring to the next of our methodology and why we are going to introduce this method and how the method will work, and then follow up with our empirical results and to wrapping up my presentation. So quickly for background, I think we all know how the tourism demand forecasting is done and also the background of that. So tourism demand forecasting is to predict the number of tourists visiting a destination over such a specific period. and we want to keep the very accurate forecast to help our policymakers and to make some of the resource management and create strategies of some of the sustainable local development. With our current literature, so we may have three kind of the models or approaches. The first one is called time series model, which will use historical tourism data to identify the temporal patterns. And the second one is from econometric models, and which use econometric indicators such as income, price, exchange rates, currencies to build causal models to find and try to explain what's happening with the prediction and also see what is the relationship between those explaining factors towards the predictors. And then the third piece is AI techniques. I want to actually mention the AI techniques more at here. So in 2019, Professor Rob Lowe with Professor Gang-Lin Deakin, they push out with a really great work in the AI for tourism demand forecasting. It's called deep learning model for tourism demand forecasting. And they actually leverage the LSTM model with attention mechanisms. And that is the very first one that actually introduced the AI techniques in deep learning for tourism demand forecasting. And for that LSTM with attention, that is the baby state of our current popular use, the large language models. And that's actually show a great potential on our tourism demand forecasting literature by using the very recent AI techniques. And after that, a lot of other researchers start using those Gen AI techniques or recent some of the deep learning AI techniques that along with the idea of the LSTM plus attention. And the biggest advantage of using the AI techniques is to automatically learn the complex and learn linear patterns from the historical pattern and also constructual data. Because if you use the AI techniques, you're able to leverage more data without actually think about which factor or which features that you need to select. And there are certain challenges so far. So the first one that I want to mention, which is very related to our today's topic, that is called sudden external shocks. And it is not very new, because back to SARS, which is around the 2000s. So we actually have those sudden actual shocks that happen for tourism demand. And we all know tourism demand is highly impacted with our economy and many other policy makings. So therefore, how do we actually leverage the historical demand plus that making our model adaptive into that such sudden external shocks is one of the key areas for a lot of researchers. Most of the existing methods assume that the data pattern will be regular and also often produce the inaccurate forecast if you're making such assumption. And some of them, they're actually thinking, okay, to remove those sudden external shocks data, and therefore they can continue the forecasting with existing pattern, or they may actually just trying to average it out or trying to smooth it out for such the sudden external shocks period. But none of those actually completely resolve this issue. And especially for recent in our computation, because we actually go through the COVID pandemic and most of our regions and including our computation data, we can see that it's even not having the data for a lot of the regions. So therefore, how to actually address that challenge is the key focus for this work. And beside of these challenges, of course, for normal demand forecasting, we have many others. For example, if you think about use AI techniques into the tourism demand forecasting, one thing that we always think is how we actually make our model not overfitted, because usually the data leveraged for our tourism demand forecasting is little compared to many other areas of the research, which have quite an intense volume of the data. And that is one of the things that a lot of researchers found as a common challenge while using the AI techniques. Next is the challenges that I want to mention for today is the data misalignment. This is actually very associated with any of those external shocks, because the external shock is the reason to cause a lot of those data misalignment. So data misalignment, in short, that means there is inconsistencies across the different variables into different words of the data source. And from the different kind of the data misalignment, we can differentiate it as a data frequency misalignment or data length misalignment. So data frequency misalignment means that if you collect data, you found the one part of your maybe contextual factors has a different data granularity, such as maybe one piece of data you collect is the monthly data, but then your forecast is more focused into annually, or one piece of data is on quarterly, but your forecast is on monthly. So it's not actually aligned quite well into the data frequency. And then the second one is actually more common compared to the first one. The second one is called data length misalignment. And that is actually quite easy to understand. In most of the case, when you collect data, some data is in nature short and some period is not a variable, but some of them, they actually give you the full period. And therefore, you can see in the right corner, the chart, you can see that some of the piece is missing from certain period, and how to deal with those misalignment is also an issue. With a lot of these data misalignment issue, so existing method cannot fully resolve the issue. So for example, frequency conversion, some of them will say, okay, can we please just aggregate the data, so make it into the same frequency? It's probably useful if you have a high frequency data into lower frequency or vice versa, but sometimes it's not going to working with your data limitation in nature. And then for data length misalignment, some of them will be use the statistical imputation, for example, using average out of the values through the whole period, but it's not actually completely resolve the issue, as I mentioned, because if you average it out, you actually try to assume that a lot of data patterns in the past will not impact to the future of the period or the period that you're trying to impute it with, which is not valid for time series pattern or temporal pattern. So to address these challenges, so in this competition, we start to use a method called imputation recovery tourism demand forecasting. So this framework, RTD, systematically integrates a data interpretation method, which specialized predictive models to address the complexities of the data issue, especially data misalignment issue during the COVID-19 time. And also we actually start to making a different stage of the forecasting. So we design a historical forecasting phase and also recovery phase separately to make sure that our model forecasting is robust enough for our future recovery forecasting. And with all the data, besides we use our computation data, we also collect SRI data, which is the search engine intensity data as well, from our regions, which is possible as a contextual factors because we are using the AI method. So the more features will actually help us in most of the case. And for the first one, imputation model, this is trying to address particularly for the issue on the data misalignment, particularly for data length one and data frequency one. We didn't really see it that often in our computation data, and most of our data is on monthly level. So for this one, we more actually focus into data length misalignment. And for our imputation model, because with our prior research, we found that a lot of those time series data in tourism demand, it's better to do it while you're doing a decomposition because the trend, the seasonality, and also the remainder component, which is the residual, we actually have a different pattern in the data characters. So in here, when we actually create our imputation model, we treat the three components separately. We propose STL plus imputation for seasonal component and also trend component. But for our residual, because the residual is really, really hard to either modeling or forecasting, so therefore we use line plus INN imputation, which is a sequential model. We're trying to give this recovery of the missing parts for the remainder components of the data. And then the essence of the imputation model is we try to enhance the seasonal and the trend decomposition parts, which actually is very powerful when we actually bring to our historical forecasting. And for the remainder one, because it's somehow really hard and the data pattern is very complex, so we are trying to capture the long-range dependencies, not trying to make sure that the fielding is as accurate as the seasonal and also the trend. And while we actually start to making our imputation model ready, and we should have our data misalignment issue resolved. And then after that, we push our well-done data into our first model, which is called historical forecasting phase. And here, we're just making an assumption. We actually think about what if the COVID-19 never happened and how that forecasting looks like with the data before COVID. So that actually gives us an ideal sort of a stage of how our tourism demand from all of those regions. And we call it the future upper bound because it is the very, very big assumption that what if the COVID-19 haven't happened? And because we have a lot of data and also the data pattern is really intense, so therefore this future upper bound is a quite well assumption on that the assumption of what if the COVID-19 haven't happened. And then the next is once we have our future bound, upper bound forecasting from the historical model is ready, we move to the recovery model. For recovery model, because with the data that start recovering that we have in our computation data is very little, I think it's only 6 months. So to making a really accurate forecasting directly on the recovery model is not very possible. So rather than making a tourism demand forecast from recovery model, we try to forecast the recovery rate with a very little sort of period that we focus on recovery from our computation data. We actually train a simple model, try to predict, okay, in the next 60 months, how the recovery rate looks like. The rate is start with 0 and bounded with 1. And from the recovery rate we forecast, we can multiply it with the future upper bound that will give our final forecasting. And why RTD, our framework, works? So the first of all, the imputation has been resolved. Therefore, we can largely actually leverage a lot of data pattern, either nonlinear or linear through those temporal relationships. And second, because we stage them into 2 different phases, so therefore, the model is more robust compared to whole stage forecasting. And especially with the recovery rate, even it's a very simple sort of the forecasting, but however, that actually gave us a sense of how well this region has been recovered in the first 6 months and how that pattern looks like in the future. And now let's move to our empirical results. So our data, as you can see as example, so the COVID-19 actually bring a really big impact of data. This misalignment is existing, so that's been resolved into our recovery model. And then we actually start to think about to making our search indicator intensity data that added to actually hold up our historical forecasting. And for after we making the historical forecasting, we start actually forecast our recovery rate and our metrics overall from both historical forecasting and also recovery stage. We use the MACE. And the baseline models we choose is EDS, linear regression, support vector regression, and also our very familiar artificial neural network, ANN, which is one of the basic deep learning models we use. And based on the historical forecast, and we can see the MACE is really, really good through our RTD framework, and is actually much better than our final results of the computation. And also particularly we're looking for what if the RTD is not using imputation. And you can see without using imputation, our RTD is not as good as the frameworks that we use the imputation. And then we're actually also doing the long horizon of the forecasting as well. And this is an example of when we move to recovery rate forecasting. As you can see, I choose 2 parts, one for Americas and one for East Asia. The reason of that is we feel that for a similar country destination, that in the very similar region, their pattern of the recovery should be similar. And this is what we forecast as the recovery rate for American regions and also East Asia regions. As you can see, some of the destination, we even think about their recovery reach to 100% pretty soon. And this is the final results from our recovery phase as the results submitting to our competition. From here, we can see our RTD has been doing really great for a lot of those destinations. And then this is an example of the recovery phase forecasting with the truth and also our method. As you can see in the graphs, the green one is the truth for Hong Kong and Macau tourism demand forecast in our competition data area. And then the black one is our forecast. As you can see, it's pretty close in our competition data area between the truth and of our forecasting. And in the very last, so the discussions of for our method that can see that our data imputation strategy can significantly enhance the forecast accuracy and also separating the historical phase and the recovery phase indeed enhance the interpretivity and also the robustness of our work. And then the path of the historical tourism demand also has impact for the recovery as what we can see. And also, rather than focus on the tourism demand directly, we focus on recovery rate that helps for us to generate the insights of the recovery before we even actually multiply with our historical forecastings as well. And this is all the reference we use. And as you can see, we pretty leverage a lot of our previous works, especially with Professor Rob Lahr's work in the deep learning approach as well. And thank you.
I'm very pleased to see there is more than one Gandhi who is interested in tourism forecasting, and I see Professor Lee from Deakin University is also in the audience. Hope to meet you in person one day.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you again. Nice to meet you here.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Now let's move to the third presentation. Our third speaker is Hanyuan Zhang from Hong Kong Polytechnic University.
Thank you,
Hanyuan, please.
Professor. Thank you, Professor Wu. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you may be joining us from today. And thank you to the Forecasting Competition Organization Committee and the editors of Annals of Tourism Research, particularly Professor Hanyuan Song, Professor Gang Li, and Professor Doris Wu for your kind invitation. And thank you all for taking the time to be with us. My name is Hanyuan Zhang, a research assistant professor from the School of Hotel and Tourism Management at Hong Kong Polytechnic University. And I'm very delighted to present our recent study forecasting Chinese outbound tourism recovery, a triple-layer forecast combination framework co-authored with Dr. Ying Liu, Dr. Xinyang Liu, Dr. Anyu Liu, and Dr. Shanshan Lin. So over the next several minutes, I will walk you through why we did this study, what we did, what we found, and why it matters. Here is a roadmap for today's sharing, and let's get started. So the first question is why we focus on China. Before the pandemic, China was world's largest outbound tourism market, around 155 million departures and over around $254 billion in spending in 2019 alone. Then in 2020, that market essentially collapsed, and we observed an 80% drop virtually overnight. And by 2023, with a gradual reopening, we saw 101 million trips and nearly 200 billion spending. And China was once again the world's leading source market. But here is the critical point. For many destinations, this isn't just a tourism story, it's an economic survival story. For destinations like the Maldives, Thailand, and Japan, Chinese visitors represent anywhere from 25 to over 60% of international arrivals, and in some cases, several percentage points of national GDP. So when we talk about forecasting Chinese outbound recovery, we are really talking about a question that matters for governments, destination managers, airlines, and hotels around the world. But here lies the problem. COVID-19 broke our forecasting models in three ways, including structural breaks itself is evolving. It violates the stationarity, and also historical patterns no longer predict the future, and market structure itself is evolving with macroeconomic, geopolitical, and behavioral shifts moving simultaneously. So this led us to a direct research question. How can we develop a robust and adaptive forecasting methodology that systematically integrates quantitative models with qualitative insights to predict post-crisis Chinese outbound tourism recovery? And this question is the heart of this paper. Where does this fit in the literature? As Professor Chris John mentioned, tourism forecasting has long relied on three model families, and each with well-known limitations shown in this table. What's missing in the post-COVID literature are three things, including the structure integration of statistical and judgmental selection, a multi-stage framework linking selection, combination, and adjustment, and finally, attention to destination-specific dynamics. So these three gaps define our contribution, and this is also the space our framework is designed to fill. So here is what we propose, the triple layer forecast combination framework. And this framework includes three stages. The method I would like to mention here is it seems like a funnel. We start wide with statistical rigor and progressively narrow down through layers of contextual expertise. So we are not replacing traditional models. We are using them as building blocks in a thoughtfully designed ensemble. And this framework respects statistical rigor and also incorporates the contextual knowledge that data alone cannot capture. And now I would like to walk you through each stage in detail. So in stage one, the principle is simple. Diversity beats single model optimization. We utilize 10 models across these three families, including 6 time series, 2 econometric, and 2 AI models, as listed here. And we evaluate across 20 destinations using monthly data from 2000 to early 2023, and utilize MACE as our accuracy metrics. I think it's selected because it can better handle zeros and the seasonality well. Here are the plots, which give you a sense of the data. Each panel shows one destination with a historical series in black and 10 model forecasts finding out from 2023. And you can see that how differently the models forecast the recovery path, which is precisely why we need the next stage. So in stage 2, we constructed a Delphi panel, including 5 senior experts, and all with PhDs and extensive experience in tourism analytics. All these experts evaluate each model against 3 lenses, like statistical accuracy via MACE, contextual flexibility for each destination, as well as their own domain knowledge. And the selected models for each selection for each destination are then combined using a simple average. And the main reason for simple average, because in volatile periods, it's surprisingly robust and hard to beat, according to the previous studies. You may curious about what did the experts actually choose. Some clear patterns emerged here. As you can see, the most frequently selected models were SRTVP is selected for 12 out of 20 destinations, followed by MLP, SRIMA X, and SRIMA. And also, the experts consistently prefer models that could handle nonlinearity, exogenous shifts, and time-varying dynamics. There is also a regional logic. For example, for short-haul Asia-Pacific destinations, experts prefer SRTVP as SRIMA X because these markets are recovering fast and showing strong seasonality. By comparison, for long-haul markets with more complex volatile recovery paths, MLP and SREMA were used more frequently. And what drove these expert decisions? The expert weighted 6 contextual factors shown here, and we collected this information from our experts from pre-pandemic trajectory and distance to seasonality and geopolitics. And the key takeaway here is experts brought structural reasoning that no statistical algorithm on its own can provide. To further enhance the forecasting performance, we incorporate stage 3 in our framework. In stage 3, we invited 400 tourism professionals to participate in the second Delphi survey and received 129 valid responses with strong representation across travel agencies, government, academia, and other tourism sectors. We asked them to evaluate our stage 2 forecast in light of real-time signals like flight capacity, mobility trends, visa policy change, and destination level statistics. And the adjustment patterns are different for the different destinations. So this stage is what makes our forecast adaptive, anchored in data, but responsive to the world as it actually unfolds. So does this framework successful or work? The answer is yes. Our final model, the proposed framework, achieves a mean MACE of 1.248 with a standard deviation of 0.795. So we don't just have the lowest error, we have the highest stability, meaning the model performs consistently well across all 20 destinations, not just on average. And now let me turn to what the forecast actually tells us about recovery. We found that by July 2024, Chinese outbound travel reached roughly 80% of 2019 levels, but recovery is highly uneven. East Asia leads, Southeast Asia follows fast, and Oceania and parts of Europe are moderate, and some long-haul markets, especially in the Americas and Europe, are lagging. So you may be interested in what drives this divergence. According to our research and the information from the Delphi experts, 6 interconnected factors are identified, including geographical distance, visa and policies implication, flight connectivity, travel costs, destination appeal, and the geopolitical environment. And these figures illustrate the final forecast for these 20 destinations of mainland China. And the aggregated information is also particularly striking. By July 2024, we found that Chinese outbound travel reached roughly 80% of 2019 levels. Let me turn now to what this paper contributes quickly. So our contributions are both theoretical and mathematical. Theoretically, we frame expert judgment as a necessary input, not a complement. So this is different from previous studies, and especially useful when data is unreliable. And perhaps surprisingly, our results reaffirm the value of traditional interpretable models over some neural networks in post-crisis conditions. Mathematically, we offer a replicable multi-stage pipeline that integrates statistical rigor with structured expert input. And this also provides blueprints for post-disruption demand modeling that we believe generalizes beyond tourism. Practically, the framework offers value across 4 stakeholder groups, including governments for policy timing, DMOs for targeted marketing, businesses for capacity planning, and the industry as a whole for embedding expert panels into routine crisis preparedness. To conclude, the broader message here is a paradigm shift for crisis era forecasting, moving away from purely historical extrapolation toward systematic integration of real-time, often qualitative information. Looking ahead, the future research can integrate high-frequency data such as flight search and booking volume, standardized expert elicitation protocols, develop a decision support system to streamline application as well as control human time cost in Delphi survey, and also test the framework's generability to both inbound and domestic markets, as well as maybe to future crisis scenarios. And I think this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you all very much for your attention. I look forward to the discussion ahead.
Okay, thank you, Han Yuan, for your very interesting triple layer of the tourism forecasting combination framework. Okay, now let's move to our fourth presentation. The presenter is Jin Rui from Guangdong University of Technology. Welcome, Jin Rui.
Thank you, Professor Wu, and I'll share my screen. Well, good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. This is Jin Rui. It's my great honor to present our study on behalf of the author team. The title is Forecasting Tourism Recovery with Multi-Factor Insights. I'll introduce the research background, the proposed model, data sources, key results, and the conclusions. Well, the epidemic has created extreme volatility in the global tourism industry, and China has played a crucial role in post-pandemic recovery. However, traditional forecasting methods struggle to incorporate market heterogeneity, pandemic impacts, and recovery path. Our study aims to develop a comprehensive forecasting framework to capture these dynamics. Well, our framework begins with a multi-dimensional variable screening process. We evaluated 22 forecasting methods and select the top 5 for each destination. The core innovation is the epidemic tourism recovery coefficient, which qualifies the gap between actual and no pandemic scenarios and just predictions. Next, I'll introduce the proposal model, and the picture on the right is the flowchart of the article. Firstly, the study focuses on Chinese outbound tourist arrivals in 20 selected places. This setting allows the study to compare different regional markets and different types of destinations, so we consider 4 classes, totaling 12 external variables, to contrast a multi-dimensional indicator framework as the input for all models. Then we integrate a diverse pool of classical time series, AI-based, and multi-variable models, then keep only the top 5 models with good performance for each destination. In the recovery coefficient model, we define an epidemic tourism recovery coefficient named ATRC to qualify post-pandemic rebound. Firstly, according to ATRC, it is equal to the actual value of the epidemic divided by the predicted value of the no epidemic scenario. The ATRC for each destination from 2020 to 2022 is calculated. Second, by using the actual ETRC of various countries in 2023, the simulated ETRC can be checked to ensure the reliability of the system. And thirdly, based on the sample learning algorithms, the ETRC during the prediction period is estimated to evaluate the recovery trends of each destination. Next, I'll discuss the key results. In this figure, the orange line is the actual value and the blue bar is the predicted value. From the results of point prediction, our proposed model has superior performance. From an overall trend perspective, after reaching a stage high point in August 2023, due to the winter off-season and a brief decline in the popularity of some destinations, it gradually rebounds. And starting from January 2024, with the global tourism recovery and continuous reaction of China's outbound tourism policies, it will gradually rebound and approach its peak again by July 2024. Well, the regional differences are particularly prominent, such, for example, destinations in East Asia and Southeast Asia have long been leading, reflecting that short distance places continue to dominate due to geographical convenience, rich tourism resources, and cultural attractiveness. In contrast, the places in the Americas, Europe, and Oceania remain at a low level due to high long-distance costs and complex visa procedure. Then, in interval prediction results provide another perspective. They show that forecasting uncertainty differs greatly across regions. Asian destinations often have higher traffic and volatility. Policy adjustments and unexpected events can quickly change short-distance tourism flows. This makes it difficult for the model to capture sudden changes in time. Then in Europe, with medium market scale and obviously seasonality, the average error is ranked at an intermediate level. Overall, the proposed framework outperforms our benchmark models, and so this research contributes an innovative recovery coefficient, a hybrid modeling structure, and a multi-country comparative analysis. It offers practical guidance for governments and tourism enterprise in terms of policy planning and dynamic market strategies. Well, the results have several implications as well. The findings reveal regional differences in the tourism market across various dimensions, as well as the evolution of destination types. Given these findings, we suggest that policymakers improve data monitoring and sharing mechanism, such as implement different visa policies aligned with regional economic and cultural conditions. Also, strengthening tourism infrastructure and enhancing service quality remain key methods to attract more visitors. Tourism firms are encouraged to adopt flexible marketing strategies and develop distinctive products, while governments could consider early warning mechanism to track policy changes and mitigate market risks, while limitations also remain, such as reliance on aggregate data and volatility in some markets. To conclude, the framework provides solid foundation for future direction. And that's all. Thanks for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Jinrui, for your very interesting sharing about the recovery coefficient and a very how to say the optional system, right? Adaptive system. Okay, now let's move to our final presentation. The presenter is Feng Li from Peking University. Okay, Professor Feng Li, welcome. We cannot hear you.
Okay, thank you. I'm coming. Do you hear me?
Yes, very, very clear.
Yes, good. And where's my screen? Do you see my screen? This one, right?
Yes, but you can enlarge it. Oh, yes. Yeah, now it's okay.
Yes. Sorry for being late. And my name is Feng Li from Peking University, and now I'm honored to present here. And First of all, I want to thank the organizer, Professor Li Gang and Professor Doris, and all the committee for this continuing 3 years competition. It started, very, very nice manner, and now it's finished with published papers and nice webinar. And I think you even have forthcoming conferences next week, right? Thank you so much. And this was a work that me and my student, we were thinking it would be fun to do it after pandemic and before Chinese New Year. We got this task, and we have a group of 6 students. So we went to this and thought about, okay, we need to think about how to do this because it's different from conventional statistical forecasting task. And you don't have continually historical data can be used for this rapid recovery. So we made a definition called recovery forecasting to be more broad, and I think that can be defined in more broad way, not even in tourism forecasting, but in general when you have shocks. And then there is the process of recovery. So we try to model it and formulate it in that way. We made up a fancy name called RISE, Recovery Informed Forecasting Strategy Enhancement. So it is not only a way of forecasting. We try to do this to incorporate different sources of information. One is that we need to have a proper prior when we want to do a long and short forecast. So we need to get some recovery information at the initial stage. That's the first thing. And that second part, we think that forecasting is not pure model-based thing. We have to combine different strategies. That's why we put the strategy into it. And indeed, and this strategy actually works pretty well in our forecasting practice. And I quickly go to this situation, go to the background. I think many of you have already mentioned. And one particular thing we observe that for the outbound tourism forecasting, we can construct that into a hierarchy way. Assume that, every family probably have their travel budget. When we travel to a certain country, they probably don't go to another country. Probably for people in European countries, they are more flexible, could go to places. But people who live in China, go to any other country is quite costly. In this sense, we think that a tourist may go to one place, for example, Thailand. They probably not go to Europe. If they go to US, probably they not go to any other places. So with this specific assumption, we simplified this forecasting destination into groups. So we can group that into region, for example, East Asia and Southeast Asia and West Asia and Pacific and America and Europe. For some places, for West Asia, we only have one destination, but that's fine. And that probably produce some noise. But in the whole system, we want to produce a whole hierarchical view of this. And in a report, we reported the individual destinations. But I think for the managers, if you work on the C-Trip, work on TripAdvisor, they're more interested in to look into the continental level, how many people goes to East Asia, goes to Pacific or Europe. I think that's some and we provided with other forecasting groups. And so I want to mention a little bit from statistical background about this forecasting, especially we name this recovery forecasting. In statistics, we don't have a particular terminology or methodology to recovery forecasting, but if you take back to 1970s, look at George and Tell, they have this box and Tell intervention analysis. And they use a particular statistical tools to analyze this irregular change or irregular regime switching that could affect the future outcomes. So what do they do? So they cut off the line at a certain shock and say, assume there's no shock, and you do a perfect forecast and say what will happen in the future. Then if there's a shock, you say, okay, the shock is different from the original data, and the original intervention analysis tried to analyze the difference between different regimes, and but we extended that into a more broad way we call it recovery forecasting. Say, okay, you see difference in a perfect situation in the future and an unperfect situation at currently, and we try to model a curve at our initial state and our final state. So to formulate this, let's take an example from Chinese outbound to Canada. Before pandemic, Chinese people go to Canada, they have the typical seasonal effect. For summertime more, and probably in the New Year time, less people, but at the Chinese New Year time, a few like a small recovery. But after COVID, immediately drops to this very low level. At that certain stage, you want to forecast future, that's almost impossible from statistical point of view. But we can think about intervention. Let's mask the yellow and orange part. Just think there's no pandemic. Then you probably get some recent curves here. And then you get a certain future, like a perfect future. And assume that is something you really want to achieve. But eventually you couldn't. Because if you look at the statistics, and when you have a shock, it will always give you some like reduction, and the wind get perfect there. And we need to get a certain prior at a terminal. That's our humans, the experts information. We put expert information, tell you, okay, after 3 years, even everything is good, and probably we won't go back to our pre-pandemic situation. It's like when you have a fight with your wife, wouldn't be exactly come back the next morning. So we need, it's still time to come back. So now we think about, okay, at this time, we need to look into the short period. What will happen in the next 6 months? Because we have exactly 6 months preparation for submitting the task at the forecast computation. So we spend 6 months looking into the initial curve. With that initial curve, we understand that, okay, there is a particular slope. And that slope gives you a different dynamic at a different continent and different countries. We use that as our initial point. And then we use a terminal point. We connect the initial and the terminal. But even it is recovery, it still have seasonality patterns. So we borrow the historical seasonal pattern, and we put a seasonal pattern to migrate into this recovery curve. So we have different recovery curve, but the recovery pattern still follows a historical seasonal pattern. And then there is a recovery trend, and we utilize different types of trend. One is we use this linear trend is here, and another one, sorry, where it is, yeah. One is this linear trend, another one is quadratic trend, another one that is a logistic curve. And we didn't know which one is better. So if you don't know which one is better, let's try to combine them. So basically, I think I have explained all the techniques we use in this forecasting computation frame. So now looking into the complete frame, the intervention analysis tells you, give you this orange curve. That orange curve assumes that nothing happened, a perfect future. And then we need to multiply it by some like coefficient. That coefficient tells you that you won't be perfect in next 1 year. And we use expert judgment to tell you probably have a 6% recovery or 7% recovery. And then we try to connect the terminal point and the initial point. And the initial point is learned in a short period that give you a particular slope, and that slope give you initial recovery, and that recovery give you initial momentum. Say, okay, how speedy you recover to the perfect situation. And we connect with seasonality information. So this seasonality information is actually similar, borrowed from similar historical seasonality information. So I think I finish this whole picture. And in terms of technical tools, we borrowed a particular tool called hierarchical forecasting. And the beginning of this talk, I mentioned that there is geographical structure. And so based on that geographical structure, we can formulate a hierarchical framework that is your YT, that is your base forecast, and S stands for your hierarchy. So if you want to follow the total tourism outbound, that's the RR1. And if you want to follow a particular region, and the Pacific or East Asia or Europe, you have other rows. And if you want to follow our bottom, that's indicators. And if you could look into international forecasting journals, they have quite vast literature on how to build up consistent and coherent hierarchical forecasting. By using this approach, you make this forecast not individual 20 tasks. You make that one complete task. You do joint forecasting, and that forecasting is coherent among different places and among different territory. And we didn't invent any new technique in this side, but I think we managed to do some certain engineering task to combine all different small pieces, make it as a valid framework. So in the end, I would like really to mention that the recovery forecasting is not only could be used for this tourism. I think it can be applied in many situations. For example, if you want to have a shock, recently we have this U.S. and Iran intention, and if you want to see the oil price, you want to do that type of forecasting. That I think our tools is still possible. And besides, we implemented open source software called Rise Forecasting. If you look at the screen, you will see that, and that is available at my GitHub homepage. If you don't find it, it's fine, and you can still find it from our paper. And on that page, it demonstrates how to use that forecasting strategy. You try to fix the initial point and the terminal point, and connect the intervention, the seasonal effect, and different types of forecasting strategies. Okay, I think I will stop here. Thank you, Doris.
Right. I would like to thank all of our 5 presenters and congratulate again all 5 winning teams. Thank you very much for sharing with us your very thoughtful thinking of this very challenging task. Predicting tourism recovery with the unstable data is a challenging task, but it's really pleasant to see all of the teams had thought through this challenging task and came out with different strategies, either 3 tiers or different ways of dealing with seasonality component, trans components, irregular components, so on and so forth, all the geographical characteristics. It's really glad to see all of the strategies worked in your tasks. We have some time next. Doris will be leading the discussion. We have some questions in the chat box. I saw some answers already. Doris also has some other questions. We can have some discussion before I give a summary reflection and pointing out what we are going to do next. Doris, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Li. Now is a panel discussion, and I have some questions to our 5 speakers. The first one is, indeed, this competition focuses on tourism forecasting during the post-pandemic recovery period. So in your opinion or your modeling practice, compared with tourism demand forecasting in normal or stable period, what are the major difficulties of recovery stage forecasting? Do you have some experience to share with us? Anyone want to share first?
Yeah, I could start. Thank you, Doris. So I have a statistical background, and actually, like, the most challenging part, if you look at all the econometrics literature, people don't want to do this type of task because they don't find the similar pattern in history, and they don't want to forecast. They want to know what the regime changes. But that's the most difficult part. Another part is that you can't really use one single model to do this task. You need to combine different things, and before you need to use different model to get the different features of interest. For example, my interest was to get the terminal forecast and initial forecast and recovery curve. So all of those are from different models. And the third part I think is very important is that we need to have to be smart in some sense to get them enlightening of the information. For example, we try to use this flight data to know this initial recovery. That's actually very good to give us like judgment confidence. We could use that judgment confidence to do a more confident prediction. Even though in terms of forecasting, this sort of terms of forecasting, we don't see the future, but use that type of confidence can give us like more concrete and robust result. I think we were quite confident when we submitted result to the team. Thank you. I think that's my thought.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Wu, for this very good question, and followed by Professor Lee's sharing. I think the biggest difference is that in normal period, tourism demand is relatively predictable. We usually have stable seasonality trends and maybe the stable economic relationships between tourist arrivals and its influencers. So traditional models can work quite well in normal periods. But in the recovery post-crisis stage, several things break down at the same time. The first is, as I mentioned before, the COVID-19 created a structural break. So we cannot treat it as an outlier, but it changed the whole data generating process. So pre-pandemic data may describe a world that no longer fully exists in the post-pandemic era. And second, recovery is highly uneven across destinations because in our competition, we have 20 destinations and each one has its unique characteristics. So in our study of 20 destinations, recovery was shaped by different factors after our information collected from our experts, like the visa policies, flight capacity, geographical distance, and also the consumer side factors like consumer confidence. So all of these factors are very destination specific. How to treat it in reality is one of the major challenge. And finally, some prior studies also mentioned that the travelers' behavior has changed. So the people may prefer shorter trips, have shorter booking windows, and become more sensitive to cost, the price, and travel safety. So for recovery stage forecasting, I think we cannot rely only on historical patterns or purely statistical accuracy. We should also incorporate and need some contextual flexibility. And this is why our framework combines quantitative models with structured expert judgments and comments to improve the forecasting accuracy. Thank you.
Thanks for Professor Feng Li and Han Yuan's response on this one. So for some of the response, that's quite well addressed those points. But for my point, so for recovery stage, the main difficulty here is we don't really know what is recovery shape looks like. Could be a V shape, could be a U shape, could be a flat linear shape. So when we actually start thinking about this problem, we're making a really big assumption that what we think is we need to learn some of the invariant pattern from the historical, so therefore we can bring that invariant pattern into the future recovery. So it's kind of like a adversarial learning if you think the way. So we first think about the historical pattern, we still impact the future recovery for each of those destinations. But in the same times, with such a change of environment, because we don't really know how the recovery stage for each of the region looks like. So we are trying to maintain that accuracy, but also giving those disturbs through those recovery regions difference as well. Yeah.
Oh, well, thanks for the sharing of the previous three presenters. For me, I think the market doesn't follow the stable patterns observed before the pandemic. And in normal periods, historical variables, houses, income, and seasonality are often sufficient to describe demand changes. But during recovery, the core challenge is that tourism demand is jointly shaped by policy reopening flights, capacity restoration, health risk perception, and visa convenience, destination substitution, and so on. So accurate prediction needs to capture both the common recovery trend and the destination-specific heterogeneity, especially differences in distance, culture, policy, economic conditions, and other risks. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. So about question one, thank you very much for your very insightful responses and perspectives. We have also a question about the interval forecasting, because most existing tourism demand forecasting studies focuses on point forecasting. So when you did the interval forecasting, what's the aspects you consider when you want to produce a reliable interval forecasting? Anyone want to share?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Doris, for the question. I can quickly jump in and give some of my thought. I think compared to point forecasting, interval forecasting is a much more challenging task, because you not only have to predict where exactly it is, you also have to quantify the boundary or the uncertainty around your prediction, which is your interval forecast. So the first thing is that your interval should be well calibrated. This means that because the tasks require you to predict the 80% confidence level, your empirical coverage probability should closely match what the required confidence level is, which I think everyone knows your 80% interval should roughly contain the true value approximately 80% of the time. And the secondly is in terms of uncertainty, there are typically two sources of uncertainty. The first is your data uncertainty. The second is your modeling uncertainty. So in our case, when we join the interval forecasting track, we focus solely only on the modeling uncertainty, and we use Bayesian dropout to approximate our 80% confidence interval. In hindsight, this is probably not a good idea. We ignored wholly the data uncertainty that might present in real world tourism demand forecasting, and did not account for it. And as a result, our team did okay, about 8 or 9 place, I would say. But that's the one thing that I would say I would focus on in upcoming, I guess, future competition. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Zhiqing, because not all the teams submit the interval forecasts result. So anyone else want to share?
Yeah, I can say some few words. Thank you. We submit the interval forecast, but it's again roughly, and we didn't think that is actually what we expect to do. And the difficulty is that we use different models and for different point strategies, and to ensemble a certain well-calibrated interval is really difficult because the error accumulated at different stages. That's one part. I think in future, I don't know if it's possible that we make it like an in and out system. So the input and output could be into one neural system, even that is with our framework. So we could do some certain sort of calibration in that with a unified framework. And yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Feng. Any other comments? Okay, if no, then let's move to the next question about, this question is about generative AI, because in the past a couple of decades, indeed, the discriminative AI models have long been widely used in tourism demand forecasting. Now generative AI appear, and do you have any comments or perspectives about the combination of generative AI and tourism demand forecasting?
I think I can go for this one as a first. So for generative AI, it really depends how we use it for our tourism demand forecasting area. So it could actually provide you more information that cannot be easily searched with our normal data collection space, but also it could actually help us to generate more synthetic data. So therefore, you do not need to worry that your data is not enough in that case. But also it could be just used to implement our forecasting rather than we train the specific model as well. I think in each of the area, it has own challenges and also it has their advantages. But I really want to address for the piece that provide more data. Because I was working into the data predictivity in the past for our tourism demand, I can clearly see that is one issue from using the GenAI is, are you going to trust the data that GenAI offer to you and implementing your forecasting? So this is one of the debate a lot of researchers start thinking, can we 100% trust, or we need to actually do some filter by ourselves? So I think based on a lot of the researchers that those data need to be differentiated as well before we actually 100% trust, because as an outcome razor strategy from machine learning, so a lot of data, if it's not necessary, that will impact your robustness of the model.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I agree mostly with what Chris has pointed out. I also just want to add that it's probably not a good idea to just dump everything, all the data you have into, say, ChatGPT or Gemini and ask it to forecast the next 12 months to predict it with text. These are probably not a good idea because inherently this large language model, the way they work is they work in a discrete space, which is the text token. So there are no numerical relationship between the text number 1 and text number 2, for example. So asking an generative AI to output, asking a large language model to output this kind of thing is not sensible. But I would say that its strength is in terms of its agentic ability. So you can say, for example, in tourism forecasting, you have a lot of unstructured information you get from, say, from the news articles, from social media. So one useful use case of this agentic large language model could be you can ask it to process this information for you into a structured form where you can use it in your discriminative AI methods as inputs, or you can ask it to write codes for you that process all of this information into a structured form, and then you can check the code itself and make sure it works as expected. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Zhiqin. Anyone else want to share your comments about this question? If no, then I'm going to move to my fourth question, and it's the last question. Is about indeed this competition focuses on the Chinese outbound tourism demand for 20 international destinations for 1 year. But indeed, when we recheck our data, we realize that until 2025, the tourism demand still cannot reach the demand level of 2019 with far among 20 among 20 destinations, only 4 destinations their demand is over the level of 2019. So based on your forecasting experience, may you share what's or may you further forecast the further tourism demand recovery trend in the future?
Thanks, Doris. So I can share my ideas on this one. So from my observation, when we do our demand forecasting, the only thing we can do is we forecast the demand. But actually, tourism is the two things coming from supply side, which is the demand, and also the supply side from the destination, and also the demand side from where it's start with. I think when we forecast demand, we can actually see from the sort of the demand patterns and therefore put it into your forecasting. But for destination supply side, there's nothing we can control and nothing we know, because after the COVID, everything changes. So even on destination area, their infrastructure may be restarted, and especially with a lot of the airlines and also transportations that actually has been changed as well. And also, we actually making a really, really strong assumption here is our interest of the tourism from our tourist pattern haven't changed that much from our forecasting, but actually it's changed. So from the COVID and after COVID, our tourist demand behavior actually changed as well. I think that is one of the reasons why we see that we haven't fully recovered even 2025. Yeah.
And thank you, Professor Wu and Chris John. I think I can supplement some responses for this question. Based on our forecasting results, we found that by July 2024, Chinese outbound travel across these 20 destinations recovery to around 80% of 2019 levels. But actually, this result is uneven for the different destinations. Like for some destinations, according to 2025 data, like Chile, the Maldives, Macau, and Mexico, they have recovered very fast, right? And the Macau's result is consistent with our forecasting results, and it can benefit from the travel distance and some policy support. And also for other destinations like the Maldives, Mexico, and Chile, they recover fast as well. And the main reasons from my side is maybe they are niche destination or a premium destination, so they can attract a smaller but higher spending segment. And this is attributed to some reasons like the favorable visas or less geopolitical friction compared with other destinations. And for the remaining destinations, I think some barriers are still holding, especially for some long-haul destinations, because of maybe the high travel expenditure and limited flight capacity, as well as some geopolitical tension more recently. So for some long-haul destinations, they still need more time or maybe several years to recover to pre-pandemic levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Haiyan. Okay, Xinrui.
Thanks. Professor Wu. I agree with the opinion of Chris Zhang and Han Zhang. As for me, based on our modeling results, China's outbound tourism recovery is likely to be gradual, uneven, and destination specific rather than a simple return to the 2019 level. Short distance and culturally attractive destinations such as Japan, South Korea, Thailand, Hong Kong, and Macau are more likely to recover earlier because they benefit from lower travel costs, policy convenience among Chinese tourism. As for long-haul destinations, face a slower recovery because flight capacity, visa procedures, travel costs, and safety. So the fact that only 5 of the 20 destinations surpassed their 2019 visitor volume by 2025 is consistent with our finding. In the long term, the market should continue to recover, but the structure will be reshaped. Nearby, flexible, high convenience destination may gain market share, while distant and policy-sensitive destinations may need more time to return to their previous situation. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your judgment, forecast, and underlying reasons. We'll see whether your forecast is accurate or not in the very, very near future. Okay, this panel discussion almost closing. There are some questions in the chat box. And
Yeah, I think there is one question which has not been answered from our participant. That is to do with some destinations where there are limited data official data available. How do we deal with such cases from the methodological perspective? So any of our speakers would like to give a brief response to this question?
I could try. I didn't do this with tourism forecasting, but in general forecasting competition, forecasting frameworks, there's a particular called demand forecasting. In demand forecasting, many cases you have like really low demand and a lot of zeros. So if you look at into the Corner's method and look into the, it's actually you need to split the data into high frequency and low frequency, and first make a high frequency forecasting to be possible, and try to put your prior on your low frequency data. That's one thing I think one could do that, and it's called intermittency analysis, I think. And another one could think about that for a particular destination is a really low proportion, but you could do like a hierarchical view if you think about the territorial. If you try to forecast the whole territory and deaggregate it and do the top-down method way to assign that with the proportion, that is actually one way you can do that. For example, if you don't know how many people go to Africa, a particular country in Africa, but you first forecast the whole Africa, then you assign that through popularity, and I think that could help somehow. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Li, for sharing. Yes, there are some pragmatic strategies to deal with the data limitations. I think the hierarchical approach certainly is a very valid and useful one. Also, taking the similar approach, taking account of the geographical proximity, if there are other destinations which share similar development patterns or tourism characteristics, but with better data, they may act as a useful reference point. Yeah. Okay, I think we can move to the next step, which is my reflection overall. Can you see my slides now?
Yes,
Yes. Okay, good. Thank you all the 5 presenters giving us the insightful sharing of your individual approach, frameworks, and the strategies. Now here I would like to just offer an overall summary and the reflection of the whole competition. Here I just take out a few highlights. So firstly, as we all know, forecasting tourism demand or any forecasting during disruptive time is challenging, as all of these 5 speakers have shared with us. But this, in the tourism context, unfortunately, this will continue to be the case, maybe even worse. In Europe, if anyone follow the news, we had a heat wave last week in most part of continental Europe. And also we have been experiencing the wars, political unrest, all of the issues, which all have significant impacts on the tourism industry. So this is the big challenge we are facing. But from the tourism destination perspective and individual tourism organizations and enterprise perspective, their operation and business strategy rely on accurate forecasting. So we need to continue to pursue some more and more cutting-edge methods to help the industry, help the destination to improve the efficiency and the accuracy of their decision makings. So it's challenging, but we need more and more exercise and research in this direction. Secondly, as we have seen from the previous presenters, forecasting combination of some ensemble methods are very useful and effective, particularly in the context of predicting tourism recovery from crisis. And they overperform single methods. And this has been proved by all of the 5 winning teams. Thirdly, the inclusion of the external explanatory indicators are proved to be useful, especially when we experience the structural breaks in the historical data. As Professor Feng Li said, the traditional econometric and statistical methods may not work well because the trends have had a structural break. In such cases, we need to draw external information to help capture the data and the information beyond the historical data and the capability of the traditional statistical methods. So using explanatory information will be useful. Fourthly, integrating quantitative methods with qualitative expert judgment will also contribute to further improvement of the forecasting accuracy. Lastly, we asked all teams to predict tourism demand. This is the real-life demand forecasting across 20 different destinations. And as we have seen, each destination receives different flows and trends of Chinese tourist arrivals. Therefore, using one method, one model for all will not work. We need tailoring strategy to consider the contextual information into the models for each of the destination, each of the tourism series prediction. So if you are interested in learning more about the winning teams forecasting models and the strategies, as we mentioned earlier, all of the papers have already been published and they are collected in the curated collection of tourism demand forecasting within the Journal of Annals of Tourism Research. So if you are interested, you can read the full papers there. Plus, Professor Wu, myself, and Professor Haiyan Song also wrote a review paper about the comprehensive review of the whole competition. So all of these papers are available on the journal's website. Now, what's next? So we have learned a lot from this forecasting competition from all of the winning teams in terms of future directions in this field of research, tourism demand forecasting. So here, Professor Wen and myself, we came out with a few directions. I'm sure colleagues here can think about some more different directions. So firstly, probabilistic forecasting method should be used and considered more often. Now, for this competition, we introduced for the first time interval forecasting besides just the traditional point forecasting. And as we know, interval forecasting or probabilistic forecasting provides the probability of the forecasts, and the forecasts are more informative for decision makers rather than just a single point of the tourism arrival. We also see there's a gap between the accuracy of point forecasting and the interval forecasting. I think to align the results, the accuracy between point forecasts and interval forecasts requires some further efforts. So this is the first technical direction. Secondly, as we have already seen from the 5 winning teams' presentations, introducing multiple information from multiple data sources, even multiple types of data, may be beneficial. And also, as some of the presenters explained earlier, to have a strong theoretical justification for introducing the explanatory variable will enhance the interpretability of the results. So drawing interdisciplinary foundations from economics, environmental psychology, technology, all different fields can together further improve the accuracy. Next, we briefly discussed about the generative AI. Now, in the era of generative AI, we believe there is a lot of benefits from the development of generative AI that we can leverage and we can use for tourism demand forecasting. Now, Professor Wu has led a publication recently using the generative AI and the human AI collaboration to predict the tourism demand and proved it's effective. I think we need more work in this direction. Lastly, integrated forecasting system. We have seen the effectiveness of combining different techniques from time series models, econometric methods, machine learning, artificial intelligence methods, and also on the top of all of these quantitative techniques, introducing qualitative expert judgment together. All fully integrated forecasting system will be useful, especially during the uncertainties of the market conditions. So these are briefly some future directions of tourism forecasting research. And now, I mentioned we have a curated collection in Annals of Tourism Research focusing on tourism demand forecasting. Now, as a co-editor of the journal, we received an increasing number of submissions on the topic of tourism forecasting. And here I'm showing you the list of the expectations of Annals of Tourism Research. So if any colleagues here are interested in submitting your work to Annals of Tourism Research, please be careful. You need to meet all of these requirements. So firstly, we expect dynamic forecasting using either rolling window approach or extending window approach. And also in terms of the forecasting horizons, just a one step ahead forecasts will not be adequate or useful for the real world practitioners. So we expect the dynamic forecasting and using the multiple step ahead horizons. Secondly, we have seen increasing number of papers doing high frequency tourism demand forecasting, daily or weekly forecasts. And to ensure the rigor and the robustness of the findings, we require at least 3 time series to be included in the empirical experiments or testing of the proposed method. We understand the challenge of obtaining the data for high frequency data sources, data variables of tourism demand, but we are aware at least 3 to 5 of such cases have the open data access. So at least 3 time series for high frequency forecasting. For lower frequency forecasting, including monthly, quarterly, or annual forecasts, there are multiple time series available from UNWTO or the National Tourism Organizations or Statistical Office. We expect at least 8 to 10 time series to be included to verify the proposed method's accuracy. In terms of the benchmark models, the naive method or the seasonal naive model, ARIMA or seasonal ARIMA, and the exponential smoothing, these are the most classical methods, and you must include these. Beyond this, if you are developing, for example, a neural network method based on some traditional neural network, approaches, then the other relevant neural network benchmark models should also be included. In terms of the error measurement, we require multiple time series to be included. Therefore, when you calculate the average accuracy, you need to use some error measurement, and we require at least the MACE, the mean absolute scaled error. This method should be used because it overcomes the limitations of the other traditional methods when we aggregate the forecasting results across time series with different scales. Lastly, in terms of the data and the codes, now we have already seen from previous presenters, they have kindly shared the link to their data and the codes. We highly encourage all authors who submit papers in the area of tourism forecasting to share their data and their codes to basically help us to enhance the full transparency and also to help other readers to replicate your models and the results. So that is the expectation. Lastly, we have already organized 2 forecasting competitions already, and the third will be coming soon. Doris, myself, and Professor Song, we are working on the preparation for the next one. We probably will focus on high-frequency tourism demand forecasting, and the announcement of the quality requirements will be announced probably towards the end of the year. Please do follow the social media linked in the Red Note or WeChat. We will make announcement on the journal's website as well as all of the social media platforms. So that's all from me. I think we are reaching the end of the webinar. So let me take the opportunity to thank all of our speakers once again. Thank you for your insightful sharing. Also, would like to thank all of the participants. Thank you for spending your nearly weekend time with us, and thank you for your engagement, your questions. I would also like to thank Chenggang for all of the coordination and the promotion of the webinars and the technical support. Lastly, I would like to thank Doris Wu for hosting this webinar together with me. Thank you, everybody, and wish you a lovely weekend and look forward to meeting you in the future, either in person or in our future webinars. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Enjoy the day. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye-bye.
nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Goodbye.